Good morning and welcome to the Joint General Government Subcommittee for our Finance and Ways and Means. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Gokuchia? Senator Harris? Here. Senator Neal? Here. Assemblywoman Backus? Present. Assemblywoman Brown-May? Here. Assemblywoman Kasama? Here. Assemblyman Miller? Here. Assemblyman O'Neill? Here. Chair Peters?
No worries. No worries. You were the first one up, and I think it was just not loud enough. Please mark Senator Gokuchia as here. All right. Couple housekeeping items. Please remember to turn off the volume on your electronic devices so we're not interrupting folks as we go. We'll have public comment at the end of the agenda today. We are doing a couple of budget closings, all of which are listed on the agenda. And I will ask staff to proceed with the closing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Yuri Yakovlev, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I'll be presenting the closing documents for 7 budgets within the Department of Administration, 3 of which have been previously heard by this subcommittee. The first budget will be the Director's Office on page 3 of the packet. This budget was heard by the subcommittee on February 23rd, and there is one major closing issue, which is an insufficient operating reserve level. The budget is funded with a cost allocation assessed on Department of Administration agencies on a per FTE basis. The governor's recommended budget includes a cost allocation rate of $1,245.58 per FTE and a reserve balance of 9 days worth of operating expenditures at the end of each year of the 2023-25 biennium, which is below the recommended 30-day level. This was unintentional, but if the rates are not adjusted, the agency would not have sufficient funds to pay its obligations at the beginning of each fiscal year. Staff received an updated workbook from the agency that indicates the adjustments needed to the cost allocation revenue to meet the recommended 30-day level in each year of the biennium. These adjustments would result in an 8% increase to the cost allocation rate compared to the governor's recommended budget for a new rate of $1,345.47 in fiscal year 2024, and a 1.3% decrease for a new rate of $1,229.28 in fiscal year 2025. Therefore, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to increase the cost allocation assessment revenue by $59,142 in fiscal year 2024, and decrease the cost allocation assessment revenues by $9,650 in fiscal year 2025 to meet the 30-day level of reserves in this budget. Additionally, the agency has one administrative assistant position that is partially funded with general funds and assists the Nevada Commission for Women. The budget inadvertently did not include funding for this position's operating and equipment expenditures. Fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to increase general fund appropriations by $10,824 in fiscal year 2024 and $7,795 in fiscal year 25 to fund operating and equipment expenditures associated with the administrative assistant position. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approving option A, which would recommend approval of a 9-day level of reserve as recommended by the governor, or option B, which would recommend approval of a technical adjustment to increase cost allocation assessments by $59,142 in fiscal year 2024 and decrease cost allocation revenues by $9,650 in fiscal year 2025, representing a rate of $1,345.45 per FTE in fiscal year 2024, and a rate of $1,229.28 in fiscal year 2025 to meet the targeted 30-day level of reserves. And option C, which would recommend approval of a technical adjustment to increase general fund appropriations by $10,824 in fiscal year 2024 and $7,795 in fiscal year 2025 to fund operating equipment costs for the administrative assistant position, which supports the Nevada Commission for Women. Fiscal staff additionally requests authority to make other technical adjustments as needed.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to accept consideration B and C today.
Madam Chair, I accept, I make a motion to accept B and C.
We have a motion to recommend both options B and C as stated by by staff. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. I have a second from Assemblyman Miller. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion passes. Move on to other closing items.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. There is one other closing item at the bottom of page 4. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Do we have a motion to recommend that staff has authority for technical adjustments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I make the motion that staff be able to perform the technical adjustments.
Sorry, and other closing items.
And other
because-
closing items.
We'll get into the swing of this. Do I have a second? Assemblyman Miller, thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. All right, we can move on to budget closing for budget 717-1363.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The second budget is the Division of Human Resource Management, which starts on page 7. This budget was heard by the subcommittee on February 23rd. There's one major issue, which is the elimination of 3 vacant compliance investigator positions, which would increase reserves by $417,652 over the biennium. These positions are responsible for investigating complaints submitted by state employees involving retaliation, discrimination, and sexual harassment. They have been vacant for over a year and have been difficult to fill due to their salaries. According to the agency, potential candidates were unwilling to accept the positions even at the salary maximums. During this past year, 6 existing positions have been receiving specialized training, investigating the complaints over the year, and plan to continue doing so going forward. During the February 23rd hearing, the agency testified that existing staff have and are able to continue handling the increased workload to continue investigating complaints. Additionally, a bill was introduced that modifies statute to shift the responsibility of evaluating an applicant's eligibility from the Division of Human Resource Management to individual state agencies, which would potentially decrease the workload of the Division of Human Resource Management staff if approved. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend eliminating 3 vacant compliance investigator positions as recommended by the governor, which would increase reserves by $417,652 over the 2023-25 biennium?
Thank you. Given the discussion that was had during the hearing, I'm comfortable with a motion to recommend eliminating these 3 vacant compliance investigator positions as stated by staff. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, make a motion to accept that recommendation to eliminate those 3 positions.
Do I have a second? Second. From Assemblyman Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion passes. Please move on to the next other closing items.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. There are 2 other closing items on the bottom of page 8. In other closing item number 2, staff have indicated an administrative assistant 2 position was reclassified to an administrative assistant 3 position during the 2021-23 biennium, which is not reflected in the governor's recommended budget. To ensure budgeted funding is equal to the cost of the position, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to budget this position at the administrative assistant 3 level, which would decrease reserves by $10,587 over the 2023-25 biennium. Additionally, during the 2021-23 biennium, a vacant part-time personnel analyst was eliminated, and another part-time personnel analyst position was changed to full-time status, which is also not reflected in the governor's recommended budget. Fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to eliminate funding for one part-time personnel analyst position and to increase budgeted funding to fund the cost of increasing one existing part-time personnel analyst position to full-time, which would increase reserves by $23,696 over the 2023-25 biennium. Therefore, fiscal staff recommends that other closing item 1 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 2 be closed with the noted technical adjustments, and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to close as recommended by, described by staff.
Madam Chair, I make the motion to close item 1 and item 2 as staff recommended.
Thank you. Do I have a second? From Assemblyman Miller. And any discussion on the motion? Senator Gokachia.
Yes, thank you. I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So we are eliminating, there would be one position that goes away, and there will be an increase in the reserves of 23,000.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Yes, so one part-time position would be eliminated, another would be increased to full-time status, but there is overall savings in that adjustment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the question. I've been assured that the part-time is hard to fill, so the full-time is preferred for trying to fill that position permanently. We have a motion. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. That brings us to the end of that budget. We can move on to account 713-1346.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Next, we have the Mail Services Division budget on page 13. The subcommittee heard this budget as well on February 23rd, and the major issue is the reestablishment of an equipment depreciation fund transfer from this budget to the Mail Services Equipment budget, which is budget account 1347. That would reduce reserves by $206,945 over the biennium. The agency has historically transferred funds to budget account 1347, but has not since fiscal year 2017 due to turnover and a lack of industry-specific leadership. However, the 2021 legislature approved establishing mail services as its own standalone division, and a new administrator position was approved to provide that industry-specific leadership needed to analyze the agency's needs. In the last paragraph on page 13, staff has provided an update on how the establishment of the standalone agency has gone during the 2021-23 biennium, along with improvements made by the new administrator position. Now that there is industry-specific leadership in place, the governor recommends reestablish. During the hearing on February 23rd, the agency testified that it performs an analysis on a case-by-case basis as to whether to purchase a new piece of equipment or enter into a lease. Some equipment is preferred to be leased as it may be high volume, wears down fast. The agency would benefit from consistent and the latest updates, while other pieces of equipment are not available to be leased and the only option is to purchase. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend reserve reductions of $206,945 over the 2023-25 biennium to reestablish the equipment depreciation fund transfer from the Mail Services Division budget to the Mail Services Equipment budget?
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to recommend the reserve reduction and the fund transfer as stated by staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make the motion to accept that recommendation for reserve reduction.
And fund transfer from staff.
And fund transfer.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Assemblyman Miller. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. We can move on to other closing items.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. This budget has 3 other closing items starting at the bottom of page 14. Other closing item number 3 requests additional funding for staff uniforms with an increase in mail stop revenues, which should actually be funded with reserve reductions. Fiscal staff recommends that other closing items 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 3 be closed with the noted technical adjustment to eliminate mail stop revenues and reduce reserves by $4,787 over the 2023-25 biennium. Fiscal staff also requests authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to recommend other closing items be closed as staff described.
I make the motion, Madam Chair, to accept closing items 1 and 2 as recommended, and other closing item 3 as noted for the technical adjustment and to reduce the reserve by $4,000.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Assemblyman Miller, thank you. Is there any discussion? Senator Gocochea.
Thank you. It appears the reserves will be maintained. There's not a huge reduction. We've still got adequate reserves.
Yuri Yaakov, for the record, yes, the budget's reserves are still adequate after this adjustment.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you so much. We can move on to the staff. These are the staff closing. The staff recommended closing budgets. We're going to go over several of these budgets, and then we'll take a motion at the end.
Yuri Yaakov, for the record. I will now begin presenting the budgets which the subcommittee has not previously reviewed for the Department of Administration and for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations. I will pause following my presentation of each budget to allow for questions. When I have presented the last budget in this group and questions have been addressed, the chair may wish to ask for a single motion for the closing consideration on all of the budgets for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing recommendations, which is noted on page 25 of the packet. So on page 17 is the Juvenile and Family Court Judges budget, which is comprised of 2 nonprofit organizations who provide proficiency, performance, and productivity training and education to judges, and assistance to judges, court administrators, and related professionals whose concerns are the care of children and their families. There are no major closing issues or other closing items for this budget. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the members? Nope, we can move on to the next one. Thank you.
Yuri Yaakov, for the record. Page 19 includes the Agency Human Resource Services budget, which provides a full range of HR services to participating state agencies and is funded with a cost allocation assessed on those participating agencies. There are also no major closing issues or other closing items for this budget.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one.
Yuri Yaakov, for the record again. On page 21 of the packet is the unemployment compensation budget, which collects an assessment from state agencies, which is based on the gross wages of state employees, and reimburses the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation for unemployment benefits paid out to former state employees. This budget has one other closing item. The agency's reserves are high, so the governor recommends a rate holiday during the upcoming biennium in order to spend down reserves. However, the rate is assessed on a calendar year basis, so the budget still shows revenues being collected for the first 6 months of fiscal year 2024. Additionally, the amount of revenue for those first 6 months in fiscal year 2024 does not match the amount that would be paid in by contributing agencies. So fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to increase unemployment assessment revenues by $10,342 in fiscal year 2024 with a corresponding increase to reserves.
Any questions on this budget? Nope, we can move on to the last one.
Yuri Yaakov, for the record. Finally, we have the mail services equipment budget on page 23. Purpose of this budget is to fund the equipment replacements for the mail services division and is funded with transfers from that mail services division budget. There are no major closing issues and one other closing item.
Any questions on this budget? All right. Will you go over the recommendation?
So as noted, fiscal staff is responsible for developing recommendations for the following budgets. To assist with the closing, fiscal staff has identified the budgets that are recommended to be closed as recommended by the governor, along with identified technical adjustments that are recommended below. Fiscal staff recommends that the following budgets be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Budget account 1302, the juvenile and family court judges. Budget account 1360, agency HR services. Budget account 1339, unemployment compensation, including the technical adjustment to increase unemployment assessment revenues by $10,342 with a corresponding increase to reserves. And the last budget is budget account 1347, mail services equipment.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to close those 4 budgets as recommended by staff.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to close the budgets as recommended.
And a second from Assemblyman Miller. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. All right, well, I think we have a little bit of musical chairs for a second while we get the right staff in place to go over our Department of Taxation budgets. We'll be on a brief pause. All right, we're moving into our last budget for closing today, closing recommendations today. That's the Department of Taxation account 2361. Ms. Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Beginning on page 27 of the closing packet is the Department of Taxation, which administers the majority of the state's non-gaming tax laws as well as the local government budget act. There is one major closing issue with this budget, which is the budgeting of coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds. Beginning on page 28 is the discussion of the major closing issue. The executive budget includes transfers of $42.7 million in Federal American Rescue Plan Act coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds to be placed in reserves in each year of the 2023 biennium for the implementation of the Modernize Your Nevada Tax Project, or Project MINT, to replace the department's unified tax system. As background, the Interim Finance Committee at its October 20th, 2022 meeting authorized the funds to be placed in reserves in fiscal 23 and directed the department to include an enhancement decision unit to specify the expenditure plan of the funds over the 23-25 biennium. However, the governor's budget did not include such an enhancement decision unit, but rather recommends the full amount in both fiscal 24 and 25 while placing the expenditure authority in reserves, which doubles the amount of funding actually available and does not set forth a plan to expend the funds. As background, the 2019 legislature approved one-time general fund appropriations to begin the project. The 2021 legislature also approved one-time general fund appropriations to continue the project. In fiscal 2021, the department completed an assessment and feasibility study which recommended a new commercial off-the-shelf integrated tax solution. And in fiscal 2022, the department established an Office of Change Management to lead the activities for the project. The agency has indicated that it estimates total expenditures of $30.9 million beyond the current biennium, with an anticipated completion date for the new system of December 2026. On page 29 of your closing packet is an update during the hearing for this budget on February 9th, 2023. The agency indicated it was developing its request for proposal, which would be released by April 4th, and which would include specific deliverables to ensure that the federal ARPA funds would be expended before the federal December 31, 2026 deadline. During the hearing, the subcommittee expressed concerns about placing the entire amount in reserves and directed the agency to submit a budget amendment to expend the funds. On March 3rd, 2023, the Governor's Finance Office submitted Budget Amendment A 231272361, which recommends reserve reductions of $18 million in fiscal '24 and $21.6 million in fiscal '25 to continue the project, which is shown in the chart on the bottom of page 29, and represents a slight increase from the amounts discussed during the February 9th budget hearing due to projected increases in EATS expenditures, overtime, payroll costs, and other schedule-driven costs. Based on the revised cost projections included in the budget amendment, the agency would utilize $39.6 million of the ARPA funds during the 23-25 biennium, which would leave $3.1 million in reserves in this budget at the end of fiscal '25. The agency did indicate it anticipates utilizing the entire $42.7 million for the project and would request additional funds to complete the project in the 25-27 biennium. To continue monitoring the project implementation, the subcommittee may wish to consider recommending issuing a letter of intent to receive annual updates on the project, as noted on page 30, which would include an update on the replacement system and projected timelines, an overview of the activities, including the positions and project vendors, a list of deliverables received anticipated for the next period and things that are behind schedule, and a summary of categorical expenditures incurred to date on project implementation and cost projections for the remainder of the project. There is one technical adjustment recommended by fiscal staff, which would be to code some server hosting expenditures and disk storage charges to a contract service GL as opposed to an EATS GL, which is a no budgetary impact to the project amount. And as noted in the executive budget, the amount, the $42.7 million, was duplicated, and each year fiscal staff will adjust this revenue budgeting based on the decisions made by and the technical adjustment authority granted by the full committees at the COVID-19 Relief Program's budget work session and closing hearing earlier this week. The decision for the subcommittee on page 30 is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of Budget Amendment A 231272361 with the noted technical adjustment to continue the replacement of the department's unified tax system funded with ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $18 million in fiscal 2024 and $21.6 million in fiscal 2025? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend issuing a letter of intent instructing the Department of Taxation to report annually to the Interim Finance Committee on the status of the replacement of the department's unified tax system?
Thank you. I know we're all very excited to continue to spend money on modernization of tech in Nevada. I also wanted to, can you remind me what MINT stands for?
Yes, it's Modernize Your Nevada Taxes.
I was stuck on the Y. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a quick question to Department of Taxation.
Come on up.
I mean, I could ask it from, well, you can answer from the back of the room. So it's my understanding you've put the RFP in the system. Have you had any responses back yet?
Shelley Hughes for the record. Senator Neal, we haven't purchasing is the contact for us. So we have not heard if there's been any responses as of yet.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are you guys doing a question period?
Shelley Hughes, for the record, yes, we are.
When does that end?
If I could allow my project manager to answer that question.
Thank you, Patrick Starr, for the record. Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. May 22nd, I believe, is the day. I'm looking for it right now. But we have a period of 2 weeks where we'll be answering the questions, going back and forth, and then their submissions will be due.
Okay. I do intend to take a motion for this letter of intent, but I think that given kind of the express schedule for this, I'd like to see more frequent check-ins in IFC if we could do that. So I was going to recommend quarterly. Does that sound reasonable for you? Because I also don't want too much burden on you if that's unreasonable, but if quarterly is reasonable, then we can put that in the letter of intent.
Shelley Hughes, for the record, yes, we would gladly be able to give you an update quarterly.
Fantastic. All right, so I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of budget. Would you mind turning your mic off? Is it on? It's off. Okay. Approval of budget amendment A231272361 with the noted technical adjustment from staff to continue the replacement of the department's unified tax system funded with ARPA coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds of $18 million in fiscal year 2024 and $21.6 million in fiscal year 2025, and recommend issuing a letter of intent instructing the Department of Taxation to report quarterly to the Interim Finance Committee on the status of the replacement of the department's unified tax system. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I motion to accept what you just stated.
You might have a second. Assemblyman Miller. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Oh, motion passes. Thank you. We will move on to other closing items.
Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record, page 31 of the closing packet. There are two other closing items for this budget. For closing item 2, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to remove storage rent expenditures of $1,469 in each year of the 2023 biennium, with a corresponding reduction in general fund appropriations, considering rent for a storage space is included in the governor's recommended base budget, which would no longer be needed if this decision unit is approved. Fiscal staff recommends other closing item 1 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing item 2 be closed with the noted technical adjustment, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to recommend other closing items be closed as described by staff?
Madam Chair, I make the motion on other closing items to be done by staff.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second from Assemblyman Miller. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion passes. And I think that was the last bit. Yep. All right. Good job, team. We made it through our first budget closings in this joint subcommittee. We will move on to our last item on the agenda today, which is public comment. If there are folks in Carson City or Las Vegas who'd like to provide public comment today, please come up to the desks. We are asking to limit public comment to 2 minutes so that we can make sure we get through everybody and that we have a fair opportunity. You can also submit public comment in writing. Seeing none in our physical locations, I would ask BPS to check the public line for public comment today.
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public comment agenda item, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.